Historian Vryn stood in the dust of a dead world. The sky was the color of rust. His 4 delicate hands trembled as he brushed red sand from a metal plate. The plate was cold, older than his civilization. His team was silent around him. They had found something terrible. The planet had no name, only a number in the Galactic Accord records. It was a grave. For centuries, the Accord believed the dominant species here, the Draxan, had simply vanished. They were wrong. The Draxan had been erased. Vryn's assistant, a young scholar named Pelin, spoke in a hushed voice. The energy signatures, they are not from weapons we know. It is not blast damage. It is unmaking. Vryn nodded, his large, dark eyes taking in the scene. A towering structure, once a Draxan spire, stood not shattered, but decayed. Its molecules had simply fallen apart. Nearby, the ground was not scarred by craters, but was smooth and glassy, as if everything organic had been instantly dissolved. This was not a war. It was a systematic dismantling of a species. Find their final communications, Vryn ordered, his voice tight. Any data core, any signal ghost. We must know who did this. The search took days. The Draxan were ancient, their technology strange and corrupted by time. Finally, in a deep, shielded vault that had half collapsed, Pelin called out. Historian. A flicker. A last-ditch broadcast. It is mostly noise. Vryn rushed over. The machine hummed, piecing together broken data. A hologram flickered to life above the console. It showed a Draxan, a creature of sharp angles and armored plates. It was not the proud warrior of legend. It was terrified. The image crackled, the audio broken by static and screams. Falling back to the core worlds, they are not an army. They are a force. The Draxan's multifaceted eyes stared out, seeing something beyond the recording. They learn. They take our own strategies, our own tools. They turn them against us. Our shields fail on frequencies they discovered yesterday. Their ships are ugly patchwork, but they change every hour. A violent shake. The Draxan looked down at a console, despair in its posture. Their greatest weapon is not their machines. It is their mind. Collective will. They do not fight for territory or ideology. They fight to solve the problem. And we have become the problem. The Draxan looked back up, a final, chilling clarity in its eyes. The elders warned of hairless apes from the 3rd star of a yellow sun, a death world they call Earth. We laughed. No one obeys a warning about primitives. No one. The audio dissolved into a scream of twisting metal and a new, horrible sound. A sound like a storm of screaming voices and breaking glass. The hologram vanished. The vault was silent. The dust seemed colder. Pelin whispered, Hairless apes? Earth? That is a quarantined world. Soul 3. It is a forbidden topic. Vryn felt a deep, old fear stir in his bones. The elders of the Accord, the oldest and wisest of all species, had one universal decree. The system of Soul 3 was to be left alone. No contact. No probes. No trade. The decree gave no reason, only a grave caution. Younger species, like Vryn's own Kthari, saw it as superstition. They believed the elders feared a species that might challenge their ancient power. Now, Vryn understood. The elders did not fear a challenge. They feared a repeat. He gathered all the evidence. The molecular decay patterns, the ghost of the Draxan's final words, the coordinates pointing to a young, violent world called Earth. He presented it to the Council of Elders in a solemn, silent chamber. The elders, beings of light and stone and slow thought, reviewed the data. There was no discussion. No debate. The eldest of them, a being of crystalline form that had seen galaxies die, spoke with a voice like grinding continents. The edict of silence stands. It is now an edict of quarantine. The system of Soul 3 is a plague box. The species within these humans are a galactic pathogen. They do not wage war. They propagate adaptation. To engage them is to provide them with the data they need to evolve. To fight them is to teach them how to kill you. They must be left to their own world. Perhaps they will turn their adaptive nature upon themselves and burn out. That is our only hope. The decree was sent across the Accord. Absolute non-interference with SOL-3. All patrols to avoid the sector. All curiosity is forbidden. Back on his ship, Vryn watched the stars. He felt the weight of history. He had uncovered the reason for the oldest fear in the galaxy. Pelin stood beside him, young and ambitious. It seems so extreme, historian, Pelin said. To fear a species not even free of its own gravity? What could they possibly do to us now? Vryn thought of the smooth, glassy ground where a billion Draxan had been unmade. He thought of the terror in the Draxan's final message. They do not need to do anything now, Vryn said softly. The warning is not for the humans of today. It is for the humans we would create by touching them. The elders are not trying to cage them. They are trying to save us from making them into what they once were, from making them notice us. But as he looked at Pelin's skeptical face, he knew the truth. The young never listen to the old. Warnings are made to be tested. The Kthari were a proud, strong species, masters of 100 worlds. They would see the elders' fear as weakness. They would see a quarantined world rich in resources as a prize. And Vryn knew with a cold certainty that someone would disobey. The grand chamber of the Kthari High Command buzzed with a feeling close to rebellion. Commander Kale stood tall in the center of the room, his scaled hide reflecting the harsh light. He was young for his rank, ambitious and tired of old stories. On a large screen behind him, the data from historian Vryn's discovery was displayed. The Elder's quarantine order flashed beside it in stern, unchangeable text. "This is fear talking," Kale said, his voice strong and clear for all the commanders and politicians to hear. The fear of the old and the slow. They find bones and hear ghost stories and tell us to hide from shadows. An older commander, his scales dulled with time, shifted in his seat. "The edict is clear, Kale. The elders have reasons. Their reasons are dust." Kale responded, tapping the screen. "The Draxan fell 1,000 generations ago. What are the humans now? We have long-range scans. Let me show you." He changed the display. Now it showed a blue-green planet, Sol-3. The images were taken from the very edge of the forbidden sector, against orders. The room leaned forward. The planet was divided. They saw flashes of explosions, petty wars between human tribes. They saw swathes of land gray and sick from pollution. They saw chaotic orbital paths of primitive satellites like a messy nest. They saw no unified signal, no planetary government, no signs of faster-than-light travel. "Look at them," Kale said, a note of contempt in his voice. "They are divided. They fight over patches of dirt and ideologies we left behind ages ago. They poison their own air and water. They are barbarians, still chained to their gravity well." He zoomed in on a resource report compiled by Kthari prospectors. "However, their world is rich. Here and here," he said, highlighting areas, "are massive deposits of Lattice 7 mineral. It is crucial for our new psychic wave communication systems. It is rare in our space. On their world, it is common. The elders would have us ignore this treasure because of a ghost story." A politician, a sleek female Kthari named Terra, spoke up. "The quarantine is a Accord-wide law, Commander. To break it is to risk our standing." Kale smiled, a sharp showing of teeth. "The Accord votes. The elders advise, but the member species decide. I propose we bring a motion to the Accord Assembly. We show them these images. We show them a fractured, dying species sitting on a fortune they cannot use. We propose a humanitarian mission." The room was quiet, considering. The word humanitarian was clever. It sounded noble. "We go to them," Kale continued. "We offer them simple technology, clean water filters, basic medicine, in exchange for mining rights to the Lattice 7 in barren areas. We lift them up in a controlled way. We get what we need. The Accord gets new resources. And we prove the elders are clinging to a dead past." The idea spread through the room like a current. It was not about defiance, they told themselves. It was about progress. It was about using resources for the greater good. The fear of the elders was a cold, abstract thing. The glittering promise of Lattice 7 was real and immediate. The vote in the Kthari High Command was not unanimous, but it was decisive. They would challenge the edict. Weeks later, in the vast assembly hall of the Galactic Accord, the Kthari made their case. They showed the same images Kale had used. They spoke of resource management and benevolent oversight. They painted the humans as children, fighting in a sandbox, unaware of the universe. Historian Vryn was there, sitting in the observer's gallery. He felt a deep chill as he listened. They saw the human wars and thought weakness. He saw them and thought practice. They saw the pollution and thought stupidity. He wondered what terrible problem of their own planet they were trying to solve with such brutal methods. When the vote was called, only the eldest species, those who remembered deeper histories, voted to uphold the quarantine. The majority, swayed by Kthari logic and tempted by the resources, voted to rescind the edict. The quarantine of Sol 3 was lifted. As the assembly adjourned, Vryn approached Kale, who was surrounded by well-wishers. "Commander," Vryn said quietly. Kale looked down at the historian.
"Ah, Vryn.
"Your discovery started this. You should be proud. We are moving forward, not hiding." "You see a sick child," Vryn said, his voice low. "I showed you the work of a cured plague. You are not opening a door to help them. You are opening a door and stepping into the plague ward." Kale's expression hardened. "Your metaphors are as dusty as your relics, historian. We are the Kthari. We have energy shields and plasma cannons. They have what? Crude fission weapons? Chemical rockets? We will be like gods to them. They will be grateful." The Draxan thought the same, Vryn whispered. But Kale was already turning away, laughing at a joke from a colleague. The decision was made. The path was set. Back on his ship, Kale looked at the fresh orders. He was to command the first contact mission. A diplomatic and assessment vessel, the Ktharas Pride, was being prepared. It was a mighty ship, its hull gleaming, its weapons powerful. It was a symbol of Kthari strength that he stood on the bridge as the ship slipped into the void, heading for the once-forbidden yellow star. He felt a thrill. He was making history. He would be the one to bring a backward species into the light, and in doing so, secure power and wealth for his people. On his screen, the blue marble of Earth grew larger. He saw the swirl of white clouds, the vast oceans. It looked fragile, peaceful. "Open a channel to their main planetary communication networks," he ordered his communications officer. "Send the standard first contact package. Languages, peaceful greetings, our glorious history." He leaned back in his command chair. This would be simple. They would be awed. They would be compliant. The Elder's warning was just noise, the sound of fading power trying to scare the new. He never considered that the silence from Earth, as his signal went out, was not the silence of awe. It was the silence of 100 fractured human tribes suddenly stopping their noise, turning their heads, and focusing on a single, new, and very interesting problem. The signal from the stars did not find a united planet. It found a world of shouting voices. It was picked up by radio telescopes in Korea, by satellite networks over America, by military arrays in Europe and China. For a few hours, chaos reigned. The message, clear and translatable, was a masterpiece of Kthari presumption. It spoke of the glorious Galactic Accord. It offered a hand of friendship. It requested a dialogue with the leaders of Earth. The problem was Earth had no leaders. It had presidents and premiers and chairmen and generals, all suspicious of each other. The initial reaction was panic, then fury. Who did these aliens think they were talking to? Which nation would answer? Arguments exploded in secure rooms across the globe. It was the greatest moment in human history, and it was about to break down into the same old fights. Then, something shifted. In a secure bunker deep under Seoul, a man named Jay watched the feeds. He was not a president. He was a strategist, a quiet man who had spent his life planning for threats no one could imagine. On his screens, he saw the panic, but he also saw the pattern. The alien ship, the Ktharas Pride, held position in high orbit. It was a show of power. The message was friendly, but the subtext was a threat. He had read the decoded Kthari message 100 times. It was not a hello. It was a summons. Jay made a call. He spoke to a woman named Minji in a lab in Taejun, a genius engineer who could make machines sing. He spoke to a man named June in an office in Geneva, a cultural analyst who understood how societies break. He spoke to others in Moscow, in Berlin, in Tokyo, in Washington. He did not speak of glory or first contact. He spoke of a problem. They see us as divided, Jay said, his voice calm over the encrypted line. They are right, but that is our weakness only if we let it be. For now, it can be our mask. A plan, fragile and desperate, was formed. It required trust of the most impossible kind. It required every major power to give up the chance to speak for Earth, to instead play a part in a performance. To their own shock, they agreed. The alternative, fighting each other for alien attention, was a path to obvious ruin. A single, clear signal was sent back to the Cthulhu's pride. It came from a coordinated network of transmitters, making it seem like a unified planetary source. The message was simple: people of Earth welcome dialogue. Please send delegation to coordinates provided. We will meet. The coordinates led to a wide, flat salt pan in a remote and neutral part of the world. It was empty, silent, and exposed on the Cthulhu ship. Commander Kale smiled. It was working just as he predicted. They had a unified response. They were compliant. He selected his delegation. Diplomats in fine robes, 2 hulking warriors in ceremonial armor as a show of strength, and a science officer to scan for useful data. He would remain in orbit, a god watching from above. The Cthulhu shuttle, a sleek and intimidating craft, descended from the heavens. It landed smoothly on the salt flat, kicking up white dust. The ramp lowered. The delegation stepped out, blinking in the harsh sunlight. The landscape was utterly barren. It was perfect. It showed the humans had nothing to hide. 3 human vehicles, rugged and dusty, approached from across the flat. They stopped a respectful distance away. A few figures got out. The Cthulhu expected a crowd, a parade, perhaps fearful leaders in fine clothes. They saw 3 people. A man in a simple dark jacket stood at the front. This was Jay. To his left was Minji, her hands casually in the pockets of her coat, a large case at her feet. To his right was June, who wore glasses and carried nothing but a small recording device. The lead Cthulhu diplomat, an elder named Voss, stepped forward. "I speak for the Galactic Accord," he intoned, his translator box making his voice deep and formal. "Where are your leaders?" Jay gave a small, polite bow. "I speak for humanity today. We are a world of many voices. It takes time to harmonize them. We thank you for your patience." Voss was displeased but nodded. "Then let us begin. The Accord recognizes your world's difficult situation. We are prepared to offer guidance and protection. Your planet has resources that are of great use to galactic civilization. In exchange for the rights to mine Lattice 7 mineral, we can offer you technology, medicine, energy." He gestured, and one of the warriors took a step forward, the sun glinting off his armor. It was meant to be impressive, a show of benevolent strength. June's eyes did not look at the warrior's armor. They looked at the way the other warrior subtly positioned himself to protect the scientist. He noted the hierarchy. Minji's eyes were not on the diplomats. She was looking at the shuttle, her mind analyzing the heat shimmer from its engines, the faint hum of its shields. Jay listened, his face calm. "This is a generous offer," he said. "We have many questions. The nature of this protection, the extent of the mining. Our people are curious and concerned." The meeting proceeded. The Cthulhu explained, growing more confident. The humans were asking simple, almost childlike questions. They were in awe. Jay asked about Accord history. June asked about Cthulhu art and clan structure, which Voss dismissed as irrelevant but answered proudly. Minji asked technical questions about shuttle capabilities, which the science officer answered in broad, non-classified terms. All the while, the case at Minji's feet was doing quiet work. It was not a weapon. It was a sponge. It was absorbing every possible signal: shield harmonics, communication frequencies, biological readings from the Cthulhu themselves. June was recording every word, every gesture, every nuance of pride and impatience in Voss's voice. After an hour, Voss grew impatient. Your questions are endless. We require an answer. Will you accept the accord's terms? Jay's expression grew somber. Such a decision cannot be made here. We must consult with all our people's many voices. We need time. Voss's patience broke. Time is a luxury you do not have. The galaxy moves forward. You will be left behind. He nodded to the warrior. The warrior activated a device on his arm. A shimmering field of energy, a personal shield, snapped into existence around the Kthari delegation. A low hum filled the air. It was a quiet, undeniable demonstration of power. The humans did not flinch. They did not look scared. Jay simply looked at the shield, then back at Voss. We understand, Jay said, his voice still calm. You have shown us the nature of your guidance. We will take your proposal to our people. You will have your answer soon. He gave another small bow. Minji picked up her case. June gave a final, polite nod. They turned and walked back to their vehicles, leaving the Kthari standing in the sun with their activated shields. Their show of force feeling suddenly silly and unanswered as the human vehicles drove away. The science officer looked at her scanner. Strange, she said. The background radiation here spiked in a very specific bandwidth during the meeting. And their questions? They were very precise. On the shuttle back to orbit, Voss felt a twinge of unease. The humans had not behaved as expected. They were not fearful. They were observant. But he pushed the feeling down. They were primitives. What could they have possibly learned? In the human vehicle, Minji was already linking her data to networks across the globe. June was writing a profile. They are proud, he said. Hierarchical. Their strength is their identity. To question it is to invite anger. Jay looked out at the passing desert. Good, he said. Pride makes a good lever, and anger makes a good blindfold. The first contact was over. The assessment was complete. The Kthari had come to study a divided, weak species. They had left having given the first and most important lesson to a newly unified one. The nature of their enemy. The trap was not in the salt flat. It was in the data they had willingly carried away. Weakness, as he expected. Within days of the meeting on the salt flat, Kthari mining ships, heavy and industrial, moved into high orbit. They began sending down automated probes to the site's richest in Lattice 7 mineral. These were in barren deserts and deep ocean trenches, places the Kthari believed humans did not use. They were wrong. A probe landed in the Atacama Desert. Before its drills could activate, a team of engineers from 3 different nations was upon it. They did not attack it with weapons. They surrounded it with scanners and signal jammers. They fed it false data about the ground being too hard. They confused its navigation until it shut down, waiting for new orders. Then they took it apart, bolt by bolt, studying everything. Another probe sank into the Mariana Trench. It was meant to operate in silence and darkness. But human submersibles, built for research and war, were already waiting. They attached small, non-metallic devices to its hull. These devices did not damage the probe. They listened to its internal communications. They mapped its every system with gentle, passive sensors. On the surface, the human response seemed chaotic and weak. Some nations issued furious protests to the Kthari. Others made pleading speeches at the United Nations. A few launched old missiles at the mining ships, which were easily swatted away by the Kthari shields. Kale watched this from his command chair and laughed. It was exactly what he predicted. A disorganized, primitive resistance. That he did not see the network underneath the noise. In a command center that did not officially exist, Jay watched a global map. Lights flickered across every continent, showing data streams from the captured probes, from satellite observations of the Kthara's pride, from June's cultural analysis. Minji was there, her eyes tired but bright. Their shield technology, Minji said, pointing to a complex diagram on her screen. It is good, very good. It creates a harmonic field that disperses energy. But it is like a song. It has a frequency, a rhythm. And to stay stable, that rhythm cannot change too quickly. She brought up another screen. It showed the data from her case on the salt flat. When their warrior activated his personal shield, he gave us the key. The rhythm is based on a biological signature. It is tied to their own life signs. It is meant to be unbreakable. Jay nodded slowly. So we cannot break their song. Can we sing a different one? A small smile touched Minji's lips. We can make noise. Very loud, very specific noise. If we broadcast a chaotic signal on the same frequency band, right next to their shield generators, it would be like screaming in the middle of their song. The shield would not break, but the system would try to adapt. It would hesitate. For a fraction of a second, it would be unstable. How long a fraction? Asked June, looking up from his own work. "zero point 0.7 seconds, Minji said. Maybe a full second if we are lucky. Not long enough for a traditional attack. Their ships are too strong. Jay looked at the map. We do not need to destroy their ships. Not yet. We need to teach them a lesson. We need to show them that their strength has a price. He pointed to a location on the map. A mining probe was descending toward a Lattice 7 deposit in a remote, rocky region. It was guarded by a single, small Kthari patrol vessel. We use this one, Jay said. The plan was not grand. It was a scalpel, not a sword. A team was assembled, soldiers from different countries who had trained together in secret for this moment. They used no human-made ships. They used a captured probe, now controlled by Minji's team, its insides hollowed out and filled with quiet soldiers and a large, crude device built from stolen Kthari parts and human ingenuity. The modified probe landed near the Kthari mining site. The patrol vessel overhead scanned it and saw its own identification signal. It registered as friendly, just another mining machine. Under the cover of darkness and rock, the soldiers moved. They placed the device, a bulky transmitter, on a high ridge overlooking the mining operation. They aimed it directly at the patrol vessel hovering above. Back in the command center, Minji's hand hovered over a key. The noise is ready. It will be painful for them. A screech across their senses. But it is not a weapon. It is a disturbance. Jay gave the order. On the ridge. The device powered up. It sent out no blast of energy. It emitted a terrible, focused pulse of chaotic data, screaming directly on the precise harmonic frequency of the Kthari shields. On the Kthari patrol vessel, alarms shrieked. The ship's shield generator, faced with an impossible storm of interference matching its own core rhythm, stuttered. For exactly 0.8 seconds, the shimmering protective field around the vessel flickered and died. In that brief window, a single human weapon was fired. It was not a laser or a missile. It was a kinetic projectile, a simple tungsten rod fired from a hidden position miles away. It was old technology, unguided and dumb. It struck the unshielded Kthari vessel on its main engine housing. The damage was not catastrophic. The Kthari ship did not explode. It lurched in the sky, a shower of sparks erupting from its side. A deep, grinding sound of tearing metal echoed across the empty landscape. The ship listed badly, its systems failing, and began a slow, uncontrolled descent to crash in the rocks a few miles away. Silence returned. The mining probe on the ground was untouched. The human soldiers retrieved their transmitter and vanished into the night on the bridge of the Ktharis Pride. Commander Kale stared at the damage report in disbelief. One of his patrol ships was down. Not in a glorious battle, but crippled by what? The report was confused. The shield failure was listed as a harmonic resonance cascade. The weapon used was primitive kinetic impactor. It made no sense. How could primitives cause a shield cascade? It must have been a fluke, a fault in the ship's own systems. He ordered a full investigation. He increased security around the mining sites. But the doubt was planted. The Kthari on the other ships felt it. Their shields were their greatest strength, their walking walls. Now they had seen a wall flicker. For the first time, the empty landscapes of Earth below did not look passive. They looked like they were hiding something. In the human command center, there was no celebration. They had drawn first blood, but it was a pinprick. They will now know we can touch them, June said, reviewing communication intercepts. They are confused. Anger is coming. Good, Jay said again. His eyes on the map where new Kthari ships were moving. their formations tighter, more aggressive. Confused enemies make mistakes. Angry enemies make more. We have shown them the noise. Next, we must show them the silence. He turned to Minji. How long before they can change their shield rhythms? Minji sighed. Weeks if they are smart. Days if they are scared. We must move faster. The unmaking had begun not with a war, but with a lesson in harmonics. The Kthari had come to mine minerals. They had instead begun to mine their own grave, giving the humans the tools to dig it with every moment they stayed. Commander Kale's confusion curdled into rage. A ship was down. His warriors were injured. The humans had not faced them in battle. They had tricked them. They had used some dirty technical trick. He would not tolerate it. The Accord had voted for a peaceful mission, but Kale decided peace was over. The humans needed to be shown real power. He ordered the mining operations to continue, but now under the guard of full battle groups. He also chose a target. A human military base in a mountainous region had been launching those useless missiles. It was a symbol of their defiance. He would erase it. It would be a clear message. The Kthari fleet moved with terrifying grace. 3 destroyers descended through the atmosphere, their shields shimmering like heat haze. They hovered above the base. On the ground, sirens wailed.
Uman scrambled.
It looked like panic. From his command ship in orbit, Kale gave the order. Disable their defenses, then level the main structures. The lead destroyer fired a warning shot, a bright lance of plasma that carved a molten line in the earth a mile from the base. The standard demand for surrender was broadcast. There was no answer, only silence. Annoyed, Kale ordered the attack. The destroyers opened fire with their main guns. Bolts of plasma rained down. They struck the base's buildings, which erupted in fire and smoke. It was over in seconds. The base was a burning ruin. No human weapons had fired back. Kale allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. This was the language these apes understood. He ordered scans of the wreckage to confirm the kill. The science officer looked at her screen, her head tilting. Commander, the thermal signatures are wrong. The heat is too uniform. And the structural readings. There is no metal debris. Only rock and synthetic compounds. Before Kale could ask what she meant, alarms blared across the fleet. Multiple launches. From the valley floor. From the ridge lines. Hundreds of signatures. On the view screen, the burning base was suddenly surrounded by fire, but not from the ground up. Dozens of missile silos, camouflaged as rocks and dirt, opened all around the destroyers. They were not firing at the ships, however. They were firing past them into the sky. The missiles exploded high above the Kthari ships. They did not contain explosives. They released thick, black clouds of carbon filament and specially designed metallic chaff. It was like throwing a blanket of dense, chaotic static over the entire area. The Kthari sensors screamed. Their targeting systems confused the swirling chaff for thousands of new targets. Their communications crackled with interference. They are blinding us, the tactical officer shouted. Raise altitude. Get above the cloud. Kale ordered. As the destroyers began to climb, a second wave activated. From hidden bunkers dug deep into the mountains, railgun batteries emerged. These were not fancy. They were crude, powerful, and wired directly to geothermal power sources. They had one job: throw a very heavy piece of metal very fast in a straight line. They had no targeting computers now. They had human spotters on the ground, watching through old-fashioned telescopes, yelling coordinates. The railguns fired. The projectiles were invisible, moving faster than sound. They struck the underbellies of the climbing destroyers. The Kthari shields flared bright, absorbing the immense kinetic energy. The ships rocked violently. One shield, stressed by the climb and the interference cloud, met a projectile at the exact wrong harmonic moment. It flickered just for an instant. That instant was enough. The next projectile hit bare hull. It tore through armor and machinery with a terrible sound. The destroyer listed, trailing smoke and fire. It was not destroyed, but it was badly hurt. The other 2 destroyers, unable to see or aim properly, fired their weapons wildly. They hit mountainsides and empty valleys, causing landslides but no human casualties. "Fall back! Return to orbit!" Kale snarled, his face a mask of fury. The fleet disengaged, leaving one wounded ship struggling to follow. The human-made cloud slowly dissipating below. It was not a human victory. They had not destroyed a single Kthari ship completely. But they had done something far worse. They had changed the rules. The first battle was fought with Kthari plasma and human concrete decoys. The second battle, minutes later, was fought with human chaff and Kthari confusion. The weapons were different. The tactics were unrecognizable from the first engagement. In the command center, Jay watched the data feed. Minji was already analyzing the shield fluctuations from the damaged destroyer. June was listening to the panicked Kthari communications. "They are angry," June reported. "But more than that, they are afraid. Their reports keep saying, unpredictable, illogical. They do not know what we will do next." "Good," Jay said, for the third time. "We must never do the same thing twice. They have a book of war. We must rip out the pages as fast as they can read them." Across the globe, the lesson was learned. Guerrilla units in South America used hijacked Kthari mining drones to drop their own explosives on other mining sites. In the Pacific, submarines released swarms of tiny, smart mines that attached to Kthari hulls and shorted out external sensors. In Siberia, engineers used stolen Kthari power cells to supercharge old radar arrays, creating localized energy storms that messed with ship systems. There was no front line. There was no human fleet to crush. Every attack was different. A nuisance one day, a real threat the next. The Kthari could level cities, but the humans seemed willing to let them. They were not fighting for territory. They were fighting for data. Every interaction, every failed shield, every Kthari response was studied, fed into networks, and used to design the next different annoyance. Commander Kale sat in his quiet, clean command chair, but he felt like he was fighting a storm. He would punch and his fist would hit smoke. Then the smoke would bite his hand with a new set of teeth each time. His fleet was stronger, but it was getting tired. His crews were nervous. They had trained for space battles against orderly foes, not a planet that fought back like a poisonous, shape-shifting creature. He sent a desperate report to the Accord. "The human species exhibits rapid, unstructured tactical evolution. They are not waging war. They are engineering conflict. Request immediate reinforcements for a full planetary pacification." The word pacification felt hollow even as he said it. How do you pacify a ghost? How do you defeat an enemy that learns, adapts, and changes between every single skirmish? The Elder's warning echoed in his mind, not as a whisper, but as a scream he finally understood. They did not fight for victory. They fought to solve the problem. And he, Commander Kale, had just introduced himself and his entire fleet as the newest, most interesting problem humanity had ever faced. The Galactic Accord received Commander Kale's plea not with urgency, but with disbelief that turned to worry. A full Kthari battle group was being harassed by a pre-space flight species? It was impossible. It had to be Kthari incompetence. Yet, the evidence was there. Damaged ships, failed mining operations, confused reports of unpredictable tactics to save face and secure the Lattice 7. The Accord assembled a pacification fleet. Ships from a dozen species, each with their own advanced technology, gathered at the edge of the Sol system. It was a breathtaking display of power. There were the crystalline warships of the Telani, the living biovessels of the Vornex, and more Kthari destroyers, sleek and deadly. Their mission was simple: enter the system, orbit Earth, and present an overwhelming show of force. The humans would surrender immediately. The Accord would take control and order would be restored. The fleet, named Harmonious Resolve, moved toward Mars. It was the perfect staging point. From there, they would descend upon Earth and end this nonsense. On Earth, the mood was not fear, but a terrible, focused calm. The global network, born from desperation, now hummed with a single purpose. Jay, Minji, and June were at the heart of it, but they were just conductors. The orchestra was the whole world. Minji's work was ready. In deep underground labs, Built in secret over decades for other reasons, her teams had not built a weapon. They had built a lens. Using the stolen Lattice 7 mineral, the very reason the Kthari had come, they constructed a massive psychic resonance amplifier. It did not hurt the body. It targeted the mind. June's work was also ready. He had compiled profiles not just on the Kthari, but on every species in the Accord fleet. Their myths, their fears, the shape of their collective nightmares. He found the common thread, a deep, instinctual fear of the unknown predator, of the shadow that learns and adapts. We will not broadcast a threat, June explained to the Silent Command Council. We will broadcast a concept, the concept of humanity, not as individuals but as a force, a single, relentless problem-solving will. The plan was audacious. They would use the amplifier at the moment the Accord fleet was most confident, most concentrated. They would use Mars as part of the tool. The Harmonious Resolve fleet settled into orbit around the Red Planet. Commander Kale, now just a junior officer in this much larger force, felt relief. Finally, real power. The Accord fleet commander, a stern Vornex named Zill, sent the ultimatum to Earth. The terms were harsh. Complete disarmament.
Absolute accord gouvernance.
It was a demand for slavery. The human response was silence for 1 hour. Then a single, simple message. We reject your terms. You are in our home. Fleet Commander Zill was amused. Such bravado. He gave the order. The fleet would move to Earth in a precise, glorious formation. It would be a parade of invincibility that as the great ships powered up their engines and began to move, the humans acted. On the dark side of Mars, hidden in a deep canyon, the human device activated. It did not fire a beam. It emitted a pulse. A silent, invisible wave of amplified psychic resonance. It used the Lattice 7 to bend and focus the pulse, using the mass of Mars itself as a lens. The pulse washed over the Harmonious Resolve fleet. On the bridge of every ship, nothing happened at first. Then the crews felt it, a creeping sense of dread. It was not a sound or an image. It was a feeling injected directly into their subconscious. The Telani officers, beings of light and crystal, felt a cold, dark shadow passing over their collective memory. A shadow that learned the frequency of their light and began to dim it. The Vornex, linked to their living ships, felt a foreign will, cold and logical, probing their biological systems, learning how to make them sick. The Kthari saw not primitive humans, but a swarm. 1 billion eyes looking up from the blue planet below, all focusing on them. They felt the collective calculation, the relentless, patient will that had turned a shield frequency into a weapon, that had turned their own mining probe into a lesson. They felt the truth the elders had known. Humanity was not fighting a war. They were studying them, and the final exam was annihilation. It was the concept of the human race as a single, adaptive predator. Panic, raw and instinctual, exploded across the fleet. It was not a military defeat. It was a psychic break. The careful formations fell apart. A Telani cruiser, gripped by the overwhelming fear that its unique energy signature was being catalogued for extinction, fired its engines wildly to escape, colliding with a Vornex bioship. The Kthari ships, their crews screaming about the eyes and the solving mind, broke ranks and began firing, not at Earth, but at shadows on their scanners, at each other in their confusion. The human fleet, what little there was of it, did not engage. A handful of crude ships, built from stolen parts and human stubbornness, moved from behind the moon. They did not attack the mighty Accord vessels. They moved toward the Kthari command ship. The Ktharis Pride on its bridge. Commander Kale was on his knees. The psychic pulse had hit him hardest of all. He saw the salt flat, the calm eyes of Jay, not as a primitive, but as a scientist observing a specimen. He saw every human attack not as an insult, but as a data point. He finally understood the unmaking. The Draxan were not conquered. They were understood and then taken apart. As the human ships approached, they did not fire weapons. They broadcast a tight, clear signal on the Kthari command frequency. It was Jay's voice, calm as it had been on the salt flat. Commander Kale, you are beaten, not by our weapons but by your own understanding. Leave now. Take your broken fleet. Tell the Accord what you felt. Tell them the elders were right. The human ships turned and left, ignoring the chaos of the Grand Fleet. Fleet Commander Zil, fighting to control his own terror, saw the total collapse of his force. They were not battle-damaged. They were traumatized. The will to fight was gone, replaced by a primal need to flee the terrible, focused attention of that blue world. The order to retreat was given. It was not an orderly withdrawal. It was a rout. Ships scrambled over each other, desperate to get out of the system, to put distance between themselves and the haunting concept of humanity. The Battle of Mars was over. No human ship had fired a shot at the main fleet. Yet they had won. They had weaponized the only thing they had ever truly had in surplus: their relentless collective will. They had broadcasted their nature, and the galaxy, for the first time, truly saw it. And it was terrified. The garden was small, quiet, and green. It sat inside a human diplomatic vessel that hung in neutral space, far from Earth. The air smelled of damp soil and growing things, a sharp contrast to the sterile scent of starships. June sat on a simple stone bench, waiting. He wore plain clothes. He held no weapon, not even a data pad. Across from him, a door hissed open. 3 beings entered. Historian Vryn, his 4 hands clasped tightly. A Telani representative, its crystalline body flickering with low, anxious light. And Fleet Commander Zil, the Vornex, who moved with the stiff pride of someone who had just survived a nightmare. They sat. There was a long silence, filled only by the trickle of a small water feature. June spoke first, his voice soft. "Thank you for coming." Zil's translated voice was a harsh scrape. "You issued a summons. We are here. Do not think this is a negotiation. It is a hearing." June nodded, as if accepting the correction. "A hearing is good. We should all listen." He looked at Vryn. "Historian, you understand now, don't you? What your elders saw." Vryn's large, dark eyes were weary. He had seen the recordings from the shattered fleet. He had felt the edges of the psychic echo. They saw the end of the Draxon. They saw what you become when you are given a problem. "Yes," June said. "We are a tool. A very sharp, adaptive tool. For millennia, our only problem was ourselves, our environment, our own conflicts. We became very good at solving those problems, often in terrible ways. You," he gestured gently to the aliens, "you made yourselves our new problem. You unified us. You gave us a purpose that was not about fighting each other." He turned to Zil. "You came to pacify us. But you cannot pacify a process. You cannot surrender to a storm. You can only wait for it to pass, or get out of its path." Zil shifted, his living armor rustling. "You boast of your violence." "I state a fact," June replied, his tone unchanged. "We did not destroy your fleet. Your fear did. Your own understanding of what we are did. The weapon was not a bomb. It was a mirror. We showed you the collective will of a species that has spent its entire existence surviving against impossible odds. You saw yourself through that will, and you saw your own end." He leaned forward slightly. "The Elder's warning was not to protect you from us. It was to protect you from what you would force us to become. By touching us, you did not find monsters. You created them. You looked into the dark and shined a light, and you were horrified by what looked back." The Talani's light pulsed. "What do you want?"
June sat back.
"We want the quarantine back." The statement hung in the air, simple and shocking. "But on new terms," June continued. "A mutual quarantine. You will leave our system. You will not observe. You will not probe. In return, we will not expand. We will not send ships or signals into your space. We will stay here, in our sandbox, and continue to solve our own problems." Vryn blinked. "You would cage yourselves?" "We are offering you a cage of your own," June said. "A buffer. A demilitarized zone of silence between your galaxy and our nature. We will trade, perhaps, carefully, through designated stations at the edge of the zone. Knowledge for knowledge. But no more visits. No more humanitarian missions." Fleet Commander Zil stared. This was not a demand for tribute or submission. It was a demand for mutual isolation. It was an admission that contact was poison. And if we refuse? If the Accord decides to return in greater force? June's gaze was steady. Then you will have a war. Not the war you imagine with fleets and battle lines. You will have the war the Draxon had. You will fight an enemy that learns faster than you can adapt. An enemy that will turn your own technology, your own culture, your own strengths into the weapons that unmake you. It will be costly for you. It will be tragic for us. For we do not wish to be that tool. But if you make yourself the problem, we will solve you. It is what we do. The quiet truth of it filled the garden. It was not a threat of evil, but a promise of function. A hammer does not threaten the nail. It is simply what it is. Historian Vryn finally understood the full depth of the caution. The elders had not feared humanity's malice. They had feared their purpose. A species that viewed conflict not as a contest, but as a complex equation to be broken down and solved. To engage them was to insert yourself into that equation. "We will take your terms to the Accord," Zil said, his voice defeated. The fight was gone. He had felt the psychic storm. He knew the human was not lying. After they left, June remained in the garden for a long time. He looked at the green leaves, the product of a world that had fought itself for every inch of life. He thought of Jay and Minji already back on Earth, turning their terrifying focus to rebuilding, to cleaning their own planet, now that the external problem was gone. The galaxy would agree to the terms. Fear would ensure it. They would call it the Soul Compact. They would build a silent, empty zone around the yellow star. They would tell stories to their young, warning them of the world that was left alone not because it was weak, but because it was too dangerous to disturb. And on Earth, humanity would look up at the stars, now quiet again. They had met the universe, and the universe had flinched. They had not won a war. They had passed a test, and the grade was a respectful, fearful distance. June finally stood. It was over. The warning had been given, ignored, and finally understood. The elders had been right. No one had obeyed until it was too late. But perhaps, just perhaps, too late for the galaxy could still mean just in time for both sides. A peace built not on friendship, but on a profound and mutual understanding of what the other truly was. A peace of silence, broken only by the quiet hum of a world finally left to solve its own problems, alone.